Hey guys, it's Luke Yon, and today I am going to be talking about all of the books that I read in August and September. I'm home for a short little fall break, so I thought I would get this wrap-up done with, because I did read quite a few books in August, but September I was definitely slowed down a little bit by school. Also, I know I have not filmed in this, position in years and years. I used to always film my videos like this, but then I kind of put the camera back there so you could see more of the bookshelves, but this just worked better with the lighting because it's kind of dark outside. So anyway, let's just get into the books that I read in August and September. The first book I have to discuss with all of you today is The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater. This is her adult debut, and it takes place in West Virginia in this hotel in the 1940s, and we follow a few different main characters, but primarily June, who is one of the more important workers at this hotel. And basically the inciting incident of the story is that a bunch of Nazi politicians end up coming to the hotel for a meeting, and there's some magic in the book. I don't want to spoil too much because that's all I knew going into the book, and it's not super plot heavy, so it's kind of a slower unraveling, which I really enjoyed. So I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I thought the atmosphere was great. Actually, I think I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought the atmosphere was great. I really liked the writing. I have always enjoyed Maggie Stiefvater's writing, and I think the plot was interesting for the first 2/3 of the book. The latter third was a bit of a letdown, but I think when I think back on this book generally, I did really enjoy it, and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a sort of atmospheric, very light magic sort of book. There's historical aspects, and I just thought it was pretty good overall. It was very easy to read, it's quick to get through, and I think the vibes are very good for late summer, early fall. Then I read Cards on the Table by Agatha Christie. This is an Hercule Poirot mystery, and it actually has a lot of other detectives that she's written about, like Ariadne Oliver. Superintendent Battle is in this book as well. So I loved this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I actually don't want to say anything about it because I think it's a really good book to go in not knowing anything, because I was really, really surprised, and I think getting to see all of those detectives come together, and then the mystery itself began in a really interesting way, the setup for everything and then how everything progresses with all the different detectives. It was just a super fun story. I think if you like Agatha Christie novellas, you'll really enjoy this because it has some aspects of that as well, but all of the payoff of a full-length novel. I also thought the ending and resolution was fascinating, so definitely a very solid Christie. Then I read The Cuban Heiress by Cleeton. This I gave 3 out of 5 stars. It's kind of a mystery, it's kind of a historical novel. We follow 2 women, and they are both on this ship that is heading to Cuba, and I honestly don't remember a ton about it. I remember thinking it was easy to read in the moment, but nothing about it really stuck with me, so it's kind of just a middle-of-the-road 3-star book. If you're looking for something that has a luxurious setting, if you want to read a bit about Cuba, and you like this kind of historical fiction, literary mystery vibe, I think you should pick this one up. After that, I picked up Unearthed by Amie Kaufman and Megan Spooner. This book has been on my TBR, oh god, since it came out in January of 2018. I remember pre-ordering it because I had seen a ton of videos about it, and I've had it ever since. I think I took it off my shelf because I was I don't think I'm really gonna read this, but then I don't know why, I found out what it was actually about because it had been years since I had originally read the synopsis, and then I was you know what, that sounds pretty interesting. Essentially, it follows 2 main characters who find themselves on this alien planet. They're there for different reasons, but they end up having to work together to solve all of these clues and, entering these ancient temples because they believe that there is some sort of secret that has been hidden from the people on Earth about what this planet is actually like and the answers it possesses. So I really enjoyed this. I gave it like between a 3 and a 4 star. It was really fun to read. I loved reading all of the riddles and the puzzles. That's one of my favorite tropes in books, which is why the Gilded Wolves series by Roshni Chokshi is one of my absolute favorites. And it had just so many cool clues, and I thought the alien planet itself was really interesting. It can get a little bit dense at times, and I'm also just not a huge sci-fi reader, but I think it incorporated a lot of things that I enjoyed to kind of balance out the stuff that I don't usually love. So yeah, definitely a solid YA sci-fi book, and one I would recommend whether you like sci-fi or not. After that, I read one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and that was The Scorpion and the Night Blossom by Amélie Zhao. I really have enjoyed all the Amélie Zhao books that I've read. I've read Blood Heir, which was her debut. I plan on reading the next 2 books in that series, and then I've also read her Song of the Last Kingdom duology, which I loved, and so I was really excited to read this book. It's another one inspired by East Asian mythology, and it takes place in this world where there are 3 kingdoms. There's like the human kingdom, the demon kingdom, and then the god kingdom, and our main character is trying to enter these trials to find a pill of immortality to save her mother, because her mother is basically like a shell of who she once was because of this demon that invaded their human realm and attacked her mother. So she's trying to win these trials, and there's like a love interest, there's all these different contestants. It definitely is like one of the fantasy trial books, but it does put things on its head, and I just totally ate this book up. It was so addicting to read. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, and I just really could not put it down while I was reading. It does have a lot of tropes, and it has like this sort of dark romantasy vibes that I don't always love. Like, it's very hit or miss for me, but I think Amélie Zhao just has such beautiful writing, such complex and interesting world building, that I was able to kind of forgive some of the more tropey aspects of the book, but I also thought the ending was fascinating, and I cannot wait for the next book in the series. Then I read Evil Under the Sun by Agatha Christie. This is another Hercule Poirot novel, and I read this while I was on vacation, and it's the perfect book to read because it takes place when Hercule Poirot is on vacation, and there is a dead woman that shows up on the beach, and everyone has to kind of get to the bottom of it, and I really liked this one as well. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a very solid Christie. There were some cool clues, some very interesting characters, and a lot of hallmarks of her writing and her stories that I really, really enjoyed. So this is definitely a favorite of many people, and I can absolutely see why. After that, I read Undying by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner, the sequel and finale to that duology, and this one actually takes place on Earth, which was really interesting, but it kind of just picks up where the last book left off. It's like a race throughout Europe, which I thought was interesting. I didn't love this as much as book 1. I think a lot of aspects of book 1 that I really enjoyed were actually absent in this book, but I did enjoy the characters. I thought the writing was cool, and I was interested in getting to the bottom of the secrets at the heart of the series, so I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I decided to finally get around to Better Together by Christie and Riccio, and this is her sophomore novel. I read Again But Better, I believe the year it came out, and I enjoyed it, and then this one has just been sitting on my shelf since it released. I think this came out in 2021? Yes, in 2021, and so I've just been waiting to read it since then, and I finally picked it up, and I liked it. It follows these 2 girls, Siri and Jamie, and they basically end up going to this same retreat in Colorado, and they run into each other, and they find out that they are sisters. Well, one of them knew, and then one of them, like, kind of didn't. It's a bit complicated, but then they end up deciding to trade places, so it's kind of like Parent Trap meets Freaky Friday, and I liked it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I think it was a bit too long. I mean, it's a contemporary book, and it is like a YA contemporary book, and it is almost 450 pages. There were definitely scenes that dragged on. I think there were sections that were a bit too long and could have been cut. And also, there are some pretty cringy aspects of this book, which I didn't love a lot. Some self-insert here and there, and also some very overt attempts at not self-inserting, which was a weird paradox, but whatever. So yeah, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Not a favorite, but it's not like I hated it or anything. I think it was fine. Then I read Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This is her latest release, and it kind of was pitched as similar to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I personally love The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, so I try not to get my expectations too high with this book, especially since it deals with vampires. And I've never been the biggest fan of vampires. I like them in certain books and movies and TV shows, but it's not like they've been my favorite, like, folklore mythology creature. But this book follows 3 different women who are in different places and different time periods. So we have one that starts out in Spain in the 16th century, I believe, one in England in the 19th century, I think, or 18th, I can't remember, and then one in present day in Boston. So, yeah, I don't want to say too much more about that because could get into spoiler territory pretty quickly. But I liked this. I ended up giving it, I think I gave it a 4-star when I finished it, but in the weeks since I finished it, I really don't think of it that often, which is crazy because I usually love V.E. Schwab. But this one was just like, it was pretty forgettable at times, which is a bit unfortunate. But yeah, I think I would still give it like a 3.5 star. It just was not my favorite of hers. I think the vampire stuff was interesting. I liked the world building. Obviously, her writing is amazing, if a little bit overindulgent at times, and I liked the different settings and stuff. And there were aspects of the plot and like sections of the book where I was really, really into it, but I do think it was a bit too long, definitely dragged a bit, and I think it was just a little too dark for me personally, which, you know, to each their own. Everyone enjoys different like levels of that, but it was just kind of dreary to read at times and not like an escapist book. It honestly kind of made me anxious and a bit mad at times, which I don't know if that was the point, maybe so, but yeah. Anyway, I think there are so many people who are going to love this book, and I did really enjoy it. It's just not one of my favorites of hers, like when compared to all her other books that I have loved so much. Then the last book that I read in August was The House Saphir by Marissa Meyer, which is her upcoming release. I got an e-arc of this, and I really don't want to say too much about this because it's not even out yet, but it's kind of like, I feel like it is a perfect combination of Marissa Meyer's other series. Like, it has like the funny, light aspects of Renegades and the Lunar Chronicles, and then it has like some dark mythology aspects and the like ghosts from like the Gilded and Heartless books. So yeah, I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm excited to get a copy and see what other people think when it releases in November. Then the first book that I read in September was Sadie by Courtney Summers, and I wish that I loved this book. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I have seen so many people, especially around the time that it came out, just love this book, and I did still really enjoy it. It takes place in 2 different time periods, so we have, or like 2 different timelines. So we have Sadie, whose sister has died, and she is trying to avenge her sister's death and get to the bottom of it and try to take revenge on the person she believes is responsible for her sister's death. And then the second timeline is a podcaster who is chronicling this whole thing with Sadie and interviewing people and doing these episodes and stuff. So he's kind of like one step behind the Sadie narrative, and I think the messages in this book are very important, and I think this is a good book to read if you want to like get those themes in like a fictional setting. This book is very, very dark. It's very gory at times, but I think it is an important book in YA, and yeah, so I enjoyed it for that aspect, but I think as a book, like just subjectively, it wasn't my favorite. It didn't grip me really as much as I had heard other people say it gripped them, so I gave it like 3.5 out of 5 stars. I would still absolutely recommend it. I think there's so many great things about this book that other people would really enjoy, but for me it just wasn't, it wasn't like a top tier story for me personally. Then we have the first book that I read for one of my classes this semester, and that was A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. I have had this book forever because I saw this copy at Barnes & Noble a billion years ago, and I loved it, and I have legit never touched this book since, until I just realized that I had to read it for my British and Irish literature class, and I don't even know how to begin talking about this book. It sort of just follows the main character, Stephen, as he grows up and goes to boarding school, and it's literally, the title is one of the most apt titles I have seen in recent years. So, yeah, I mean, it's a classic for a reason. I can definitely understand why people like it, just I didn't love it. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I think I gave it 3 and then I lowered it to 2, but just wasn't my favorite. I think James Joyce's writing is just doesn't mesh well with me personally. I can appreciate it from a literary perspective, but as a book, not my favorite. And then, I think the plot was, like, fine. There were chapters and sections that I liked, but I think as a whole, it just didn't really hit the mark for me, unfortunately. Then I read The Other Boleyn Girl by Philippa Gregory. This is another book that has been on my TBR forever because it is probably Philippa Gregory's most famous book, and I have read quite a few of her novels. I've read, oh god, so many of her Plantagenet and Tudor novels, and this is like the hallmark one, so I thought I would finally read it. And it did take me over a week to read because it is like 600 pages and it's very, very dense, but I did enjoy it. It follows Mary Boleyn, who is the sister to the more famous Anne Boleyn, and I know it's very historically inaccurate at times, but I'm not coming to Philippa Gregory books to you know, read them like a textbook. I'm reading them as fiction, so I liked it. There were a lot of parts of this book that I already knew, so they were like a bit boring at times, and the book does get repetitive after a while, but I still enjoyed following Mary. I thought she was an interesting character, and I love reading about the Tudor court, so I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm excited to continue working my way through the series. Then I read The Swan's Daughter by Roshni Chokshi. This is another ARC that I got, but this book does not come out until January, so I will just say that it is Roshni Chokshi at her most fantastical. It is another like sort of fantasy trials book, but yeah, I don't want to say anything because I went in just knowing that it was going to be a super fun, whimsical time. I actually thought it was an adult book, but it is YA, so yeah, that's like a good plus, and I think if you like her Star-Touched Queen series, that's probably what it's most like, but there's lots of like just super fun, fantasy, whimsical times, and I ended up giving like a 3.54 out of 5 stars. Then I picked up 107 Days by Kamala Heiress. This is her book that just recently came out. I listened to the audiobook, and it follows the 107 days of her campaign for President of the United States last year, and I really loved this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I listened to the audiobook in like less than 24 hours. I just could not stop listening at a certain point, and I was trying to listen like even in between classes because it was so well done. It was narrated by her. So yeah, this was just a great, great book. I am not a huge nonfiction reader, so it takes a lot for me to pick one up, but I thought this one was really amazing. And it goes day by day, and I would definitely recommend picking it up regardless of your personal political persuasions. I think it's an interesting text, whether you are Republican, Democrat, Independent, or not even a resident of the United States. I think there's a lot to be learned in this book, and a lot to appreciate in it, for sure. Okay, and the last book that I read in September was Among the Burning Flowers by Samantha Shannon. This is a novella that takes place in the world of the Priory of the Orange Tree, so it is like a prequel before the Priory of the Orange Tree, so it takes place in between that and A Day of Fallen Night, and it follows a few different characters. I don't want to say too much because it wouldn't really make a lot of sense if you haven't read the other books. You can start with this, it's like a good entry point into the series, but I personally recommend reading. You don't have to read both of the books in the series, but one of them, and then I think this would be a good second book to pick up, just because there is a lot of like political discussions, which I think would not make as much sense if you didn't have the background of one of those other 2 books. but I still enjoyed this. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I was kind of waiting for the plot to happen, and then the book sort of just ended right when it did. It definitely feels very prequel-y. It feels like a prologue to the Priory of the Orange Tree, so I think my personal recommendation for this series would be to read it in chronological order, so start with The Day of Fallen Night, then Among the Burning Flowers, and then The Priory of the Orange Tree. But still a worthwhile installment in the series, and I'm excited to see what she adds to the Roots of Chaos world. But that is it for my August and September wrap-up. I would love to know what books you all read in those 2 months, and also your thoughts on any of the books that I mentioned today. Yeah, that is it for this video. I really hope you all enjoyed. All of my social media links are in the description box below, and I'll see you soon for a new video. Bye!